Hi, Emily. It's so beautiful to see you. And thank you so much for coming on to the Everyday Mystic.
Hi, Carissa. I'm so happy to be here.
I can't wait to get to know you. It's so fun when I get people that come to me through their publicist or an agent to come in to speak because this podcast is fairly young and new, and a lot of my guests are people that I know, and so I know
Yeah.
them already, and we enter into these conversations, and it's a beautiful way to certainly get to know them more deeply. But I also love getting to know new people, obviously part of my just my spirit and who I am in general, but certainly when it comes to this podcast, a beautiful way to connect with others who are on this path, the
Yes.
quote unquote path. So tell the audience a little bit more about your spiritual path. What brought you here today, connected to this conversation around mysticism and spirituality?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been a journey for sure. I grew up in the rural Midwest and, with like a Methodist dad and an atheist mom and a very like like Christian community that I had a babysitter who was like a second mom to me, and she went like very fringe Christian, and I kind of took her kids and me down that path with her for a while. So then I had to fully reject Christianity because it turned into like a guilt and shame fest.
Mm.
And then I started meditating as a teenager. My dad had like a real spiritual awakening, and so he got on a Eastern religious path and kind of introduced me to that. So I was like a teenager reading Many Lives, Many Masters, Journey of Souls, Autobiography of a Yogi, and like trying to meditate a bit, although like also experimenting with alcohol and sex and like, like doing normal teenager stuff. Um, so I was like on that path for many, many years. And then it's been in more recent years that I've kind of said, like, okay, like all dogma aside, all rigidity aside, because what I recognized is that like this craving or this imbalance of masculine and feminine energy was showing up in my relationship to source.
Mm.
And so it was like I still had this feeling of like right and wrong, and here are the ideals for me to live up to, which was really just like my inner child like wanting to please my dad. And so as I healed that, it really opened me up to just like a more free flowing relationship with source and like a daily conversation and bringing, all of the non-physical beings that are here to support me like into my work and into daily conversation, and believing that, you don't just have to commune in prayer or meditation, but like you can be communing all the time. Like on this podcast, and
Yeah.
you did a beautiful little ceremony, right, where we sort of called in that energy, and that's very much what I attempt to do in my work. On surface, I'm a wealth and business coach who's just written a book, but like as I wrote the book and as I recorded the audio book, I asked for the blessings and asked for what was meant to come through, and really just followed the energy and let it be intuitively guided.
Hmm. We
So
can call.
that's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And I love it because it mirrors a lot of my journey too, and a lot of my guest journey of where there is there's a lot of things fed to us early
Yeah.
on, right? Of like, oh, here's
Yeah.
a structured system, or here's something to plug
Yeah.
into. And those systems can carry a lot of wisdom, right? They can
Yes.
carry so many lessons and gifts within them. But then you hit those walls, I guess the
Yeah.
dogmatic walls, like you did, of where you're like, this
Yeah.
feels really too, too, I don't know, it might feel culty, or it might feel too authoritarian, or too structured at a certain
Right.
point. of where I feel like those walls, then you notice it's actually a barrier to
For
us
sure.
in that communion with
Yeah.
source. It's like, oh, this thing that is meant to guide us there is actually just a series of these barriers blocking us from the
Right.
thing we're trying to connect to.
Yeah. Well, and creating distance and separation and, you know, making us feel like these lowly little creatures that, are sort of constantly begging for forgiveness and constantly screwing up. Um, and yeah, it's like, well, if God is in me and in you, then where do I have to go?
Yeah.
How is there any distance? It's an illusion.
Absolutely. And really, meditation does help in that process, doesn't it?
It
To
does.
enter into that relationship and that understanding
Yeah.
of, oh, it's all here. Everything
Yeah.
is here. And it's about the
Yeah.
recognition or awareness of that
Yeah.
versus really doing anything specific. So I love what you shared about being able to call in what you need or what support you're looking for. It's so very practical, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that even within the spiritual community and world, it can be also untouchable or set
Right.
up as being untouchable in many ways too. It's like, ooh, I'm a
Yeah.
channel, I'm a medium, I'm a this,
Yeah.
and people who experience that within themselves separate themselves from those who don't have those gifts, but we all have those gifts.
Right.
And whether
That's
it's
it.
just fine-tuned or not, but to be a channel is to just have that openness without those
Right.
barriers to source. And then now we're
Yeah.
channeling, right?
Yeah.
Do you experience it
Absolutely.
in that way of where you just can have these, what feels like a conversation with a girlfriend, but with source or with your guides?
Yes. And like time and time again, that's the message that spirit has for me because like I've signed up for programs where it's like, to like learn how to channel or develop this or that. And it's like the message I always get is like, you're already doing it.
Yes.
You just don't know a lot of the time that you're doing it. And so I've learned to just trust that. And a lot of it comes through as confirmation, So, like, I'll be on a coaching call with a client, and the analogy that just occurs to me to use, you know, I might be talking about a pepper, and they're like, Emily, I just bought peppers this morning. There's literally peppers sitting on my countertop right now. And
Yeah.
it's like, it's those little things that are spirit's way of winking at me and be like, see,
Yeah.
you are doing it. And you don't have to distinguish what's your thought and what's our thought. Like that part doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Just go, just do the thing. And so for me, it's often, um, it's just like clear cognizance. It's just a knowing. It's just like a downloading of a full idea. Um, and so it tends to be that it's just the thoughts are there. I've had moments where I have heard a thought and known in that moment, like that's not my thought,
Mm.
but that doesn't happen as often. More often, it just feels like this effortless, we're having a conversation and I'm saying the things that occur to me to say. And then it's in your receiving of them and sharing, reflecting it back to me that we can recognize that the divine is involved in this conversation and that the messages that you need are coming through me and vice versa.
Exactly. I was saying this to a recent podcast guest about feedback I received about this podcast that when people listen to it, it's exactly what they needed to hear
Yeah.
that day, that moment.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about podcasts is that I'm not recording it on that day, that moment, right? It's
Right.
oftentimes it's from months earlier, but for that person tuning in at that moment, it's
Yeah.
exactly what they needed. So we're all tapping in
Yeah.
to source in our different ways and getting exactly what we need from it without it
Mm-hmm.
needing to be the same thing. We can all do that. And I think that's what's beautiful about this kind of life, that it's not this prescribed path. It's not,
Yeah.
oh, Emily and I need to do the exact same things in order to achieve the thing we want. We can have it could look very different. It could be very
Yeah.
different kinds of guidance coming in for both of us, but leading us to that same place.
Right. Yeah.
And not
And
to
and
discount the programs, not to discount the,
yeah.
the guidance that one might receive from a mediumship program or an intuitive gifts program. Like all of the teachers and the programs out there are just ways of opening us up, right?
Right.
Yeah, I think it's just when you start to get into the line of where it's like, oh, my way is the only way, or this is
Right.
the only path to this, then it starts
Yeah.
to feel a little fishy.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I see this all the time in, in the entrepreneurship and the business world. And here's the thing that happens. The person who found success, step one for them, whether they recognized it or not, was that they followed an intuitive hit. They were in their feminine energy. They received inspiration through the form of an idea, a feeling, whatever, and they followed that. They had success. And then now they want to help others have that same success, but they don't emphasize step one. In fact, oftentimes they don't even talk about step one because they don't realize that that was the most important part of it. And so instead, they say, do exactly as I did to get the results that I got. And it's like, well, wait a second. If I do the steps that you took without the most important part, which was following the divine inspiration, I very likely will get a wildly different result than you got. Because now I'm just trying to follow your 10-step plan instead of what's energetically aligned and correct for me. And so I think that's what happens all the time. And usually it's unknowingly and it's well intentioned. And sometimes it's just that it's so much easier to market the idea that, like, my 10-step plan will get you this result,
Yeah.
period, end of story, than to lead people back to themselves, which
Yes.
is a much it's a very different path. It's like I always say, it's like the breadcrumb trail, because spirit never shows you the whole thing all at once. It's like one little thing at a time, and it's not as sexy of an idea as thinking you're buying this like tried and true map and it's for sure going to lead you to the destination.
Proven success.
Yeah.
Follow my strategy, my 10-step strategy. I know
Yeah.
it is really, people want that though. So many
For
people
sure.
want that, or at least think they want that, or their ego wants that. Unknowingly, they don't know exactly what you said, that they're going to
Yeah.
potentially get wildly different results because they've
Yeah.
closed off from their actual higher intelligence and the
Yeah.
intelligence of that beautiful connection with spirit. So it's like and it's probably unfortunate for a lot of people who run those types of programs that, those who don't succeed in it, it's not even for lack of that program is probably amazing for what it
Yeah.
is, but it's
Yeah.
not necessarily the key to unlock that door to success for that particular person, because we all have our different paths. So what for
Yeah.
you was what was the path? Because I know you tried some of that, strategic high level strategy. You had a lot of
Yeah.
what we will call masculine, proven success formulas that you tried and did. What was it for you that made you realize that's not it? This is
Mm.
not working for me.
Yeah. I mean, my path, it had to be the way that it was. It was like those were the lessons that apparently I signed up for learning, and I'm still learning, right? But essentially, in a nutshell, um, I started entrepreneurship when I became a mom. So I was working in corporate sales. I never thought that I would be a stay-at-home mom. My mom worked, my older sisters worked. I was in a industry that had a lot of working moms and had a pretty flexible schedule. So that's how I thought it was going to go down. And while I was on maternity leave, my husband convinced me that we should start this kind of side hustle. We started selling baby onesies on Amazon because my husband was he was involved with Amazon and he knew how successful sellers were. And we just decided to try it at a very small scale. We have this tiny infant. We're going to downtown Los Angeles where we go to the American Apparel factory. We're buying onesies and we're bringing them to the local screen printer and we're putting them in the poly bags themselves and slapping labels on it. And we got like 25 of each design or something. This was not some large scale operation. And we just thought, why not? Like, let's just try it. And maybe this will fill the college fund. 18 years later, maybe we'll have this thing where we want it to be. And then I went back to work, when my baby is still weeks old. And it was such a rough reentry. It was like every cell in my body was saying, this is not right. You're meant to be with your baby right now. And so I'm driving around Los Angeles with pumps attached to both boobs, paying somebody else $1,000 to watch my kid. And everything in me is saying, no, 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 this is not right. This is not the way it's meant to be. And so I had the idea, like maybe this little thing that we're calling a side hustle, I wonder if we could grow it to a point where by the time I'm ready to have another child, maybe this would be big enough to replace my income and I could do it differently. And so for 3 years, it was like, wake up, be a good mom, then go to work, then be a good mom in the afternoon and evening. And after my daughter goes to bed, I'm going to put in like 3 solid hours of work growing this e-commerce business. And so over the next 3 years, we sold, more than $1 million in baby onesies. I'm now pregnant with number 2. And although the e-commerce business was very successful, it was growing. We were paying for advertising. Whenever we sold one onesie, we needed to buy 3 more to keep up with the growth. There was some seasonality to it. So by the time you looked at what we took home, it wasn't stable enough and it didn't really make sense that I could leave my job. And so some of our mentors said, hey, you're the go-to people for Amazon. Everyone looks to you for advice. You guys are the only ones that don't see that that's a business opportunity that you could, capitalize on. So we started an Amazon marketing agency. And it was like between those 2 businesses and some paid maternity leave and a hope and a prayer and some divine intervention, it's like somehow it all like duct taped together to be enough that I didn't have to go back to my corporate job. And so during those years where I was working in corporate, and then in those years where the agency was still very young and we were kind of putting it all together, I was very much in my masculine energy. And my husband and I, we would even say to each other, like, yeah, things are crazy. Yeah, things are totally busy. We're a startup. That's just the way things are.
Yeah.
It never occurred to us that it could be different. In fact, we were kind of like, we'll just outwork the competition. It was like,
You're going to Gary V it, right?
yeah, totally. That was just our mentality was like, of course, we're a brand new startup business. Like, obviously it's a lot of work. And so, the agency starts growing. We start, hiring people, building out the team. I'm the CEO. That's like my focus. And we joined this very bro mastermind, and everybody in there, their goal was $100,000 cash month. And we were at like 40K cash months when we joined. And so, I was like, oh, okay, this is what we're doing. We're going to try to do $100,000 cash months. Like, great, count me in, masculine energy, competition, focus, driven, success. Let's do it. And it took time. Like probably took, I don't know, maybe a year. And it was so grindy. Like I look back on it and it's hilarious. They literally taught us every day to write our goal at the top of our daily planner and then like break it down into the actions that you were going to take. And so it was just like this total pressure cooker. But we had our first $100,000 cash month. And I thought I'm going to feel so successful. I'm going to feel like we've made it. The business is going to feel more stable. I'm going to feel like the pressure is off. Maybe I'll even feel rich. And we did it. And I noticed myself avoiding scheduling like a celebration dinner. And I'm like, this is really weird. Like, why don't I even want to celebrate this milestone? And so I kind of went inward and was like, how am I really feeling about this? And how I really felt was anxious. It was like I didn't feel successful. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like we'd made it. I didn't feel like any of those things I thought I was going to feel. Instead, I just had anxiety. And what it was is my mind was like, is this a thing now? Do we have to do $100,000 cash every month? Because
Right.
time's a ticking, lady. It's a new month. We're like 3 days in. How are we going to do this again? And that was the moment for me where it was like, the jig is up. Okay. Like if $100,000 cash in a single month can't make me feel the way that I want to feel, I'm not going to just move the milestone. And I'm not just going to say like, okay, it's really like $200,000 cash months. And like, that's going to do it. I was like, something's got to change. And I think I just have this whole thing backwards. And I need to go inward and really work on my money mindset and what's going on here. And so as I did that, I was working with coaches and healers. I did a ton of inner child healing, which really helped me to rebalance my masculine, feminine energy, helped me to see all of the places where, this striving and achievement orientation was just playing out old patterns that weren't serving me.
Mm.
And so that was really the beginning of this new paradigm and this new way of doing things. And, I also have a podcast. It's called The Joyous Path to Millions. And that's kind of like, that's the movement for me first, but for other people, which is like, I'm no longer available for delayed gratification. It's like, it's got to be gratifying now and later. It's got to be joyful now and joyful later, because I realize like we're really bad as humans at predicting what's going to make us feel the way we want to feel. And so we just spend a lot of time chasing these goals, and then we get there and it turns out we don't even actually feel the way we thought we were going to. And it's the feeling that we want more than the thing. And
Mm-hmm.
so when we can just cultivate that feeling, which is an inside job first and foremost, then all of a sudden the work becomes enjoyable. There's no more hustle, there's no more grind. And so that led me into becoming a coach and helping other women get free and creating a whole money wound healing methodology and writing the book and all of the things.
What is your book called?
It's called Wounds to Wealth.
Mm.
At the life-changing method of diagnosing and healing your money wounds to receive more wealth.
Yes, there's a lot of those wounds, whether it's generational or that it comes just from, that your family structure and
Yeah.
all of the what we think is possible versus what's not possible. And I think
Yeah.
that's well, you hit on that a lot of where what we think or how we think and feel a business should operate, which is within this structured, strategic hustle and grind kind of flow in order to be successful,
Yeah.
limits us from actually entering into that flow of where we're going to create success based on what we're actually meant to do here. And
Yeah.
in a way that feels, like you said, joyous and feels amazing as you do it. There shouldn't
Yeah.
be, and I don't think that we don't need to be in this sort of structure of where one, like you said, a delayed gratification, or two, of where we're punishing ourselves. It's really almost
Yeah.
like we are here on this earth to suffer. And even spiritual traditions will say that, right? That we're this
Right.
human suffering, and spirituality is our pathway away
Yeah.
from that suffering. And I also don't believe that. I believe that this earthly life can be so beautiful and
Yeah.
so joyful and so fulfilling. It's not
Yeah.
being in this human body can be all of that. And
Yes.
it's almost like the answer to get there is the thing itself. It's like you just have to learn how,
Totally.
right? Like,
Okay, let's talk about this for a second though, because this was like a massive aha moment for me too, especially because like most Eastern traditions, there's this real disconnect between the human experience and the soul experience, right?
yeah.
And so it was like the way that I learned to meditate, they would literally say this. They would say, turn off the 5 sense telephones. It was basically like dissociate with the body
Yes.
and just associate with the soul. And I could do that. I mean, I can sit for 6 hours in meditation. I've been there, done that, like, bought the t-shirt. And yet then when I would come back into the body, it was always like a little bit of a rough re-entry where it was like, oh, okay, well, great. Now I'm back in this thing. And it felt so wildly different
Yeah.
to be having the human experience versus what I was feeling in meditation. And I just kind of thought that was the way it was. And I'm like, hold on a second. A lot of different spiritual teachers that I was listening to talk about how hard the souls fight to get into human bodies. Like, you really have to want it. And I was like, well, if
And
that's
that it's a
true,
choice, right?
yeah, if that's true, that I had to really want it and it was a choice, and here I am, why would my soul have come to have the human experience if I was going to spend the whole human experience trying to pretend that I'm just a soul and turn off every part of me that's having a human and body experience?
Yeah, exactly. It makes no sense.
It makes no sense. And so it was like, you know, that really helped me to realize, like, no. As Abraham Hicks says, it's like our souls wanted to be on the cutting edge of manifestation, and they wanted to experience what it's like to co-create in this human form. And so then I started looking at it more as this game. It's kind of like the Matrix, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, how do you hack the video game? How do you level up? How do you get the secret mushroom that allows you to grow wings and like fly up into the clouds instead of just running around on the ground where the bad guys are? Like, if you look at it that way, it's not that bad things don't ever happen. They do, but it's like, how do I make the most out of this experience? And how do I continue to level up and play at this game of co-creation so that I get to experience everything I want to experience while I'm here?
Yes, exactly. And not having, again, it's like first understanding that we have that power, that it's our
Yeah.
birthright, that this is what we're
Yeah.
here to do. Just like you said, if the spiritual traditions, if our own intuition tells us we chose this, that this was, that not every soul actually wants to come here, that this is kind of like this earth school is hardcore. Like, okay, we're going to go down. We're going to do this thing. We're
Yeah.
going to live
Yeah.
this, we're going to get in the dirt and do it. Yes. Why would you spend all your time trying to escape that? And I was
Right.
saying this to someone else the other day, that it is to want to escape it is essentially to want to die and
Yeah.
re-enter into that soul space. And there's nothing wrong with that either, but it's kind of like, well, is that what you really want?
Right.
To
Yeah, I feel like you're going to get back up there and your soul's going to be like, you didn't understand the assignment.
yes.
Now we need a do-over.
Yeah. Yeah. We've probably done that many times. Right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And coming into, let's say, this relationship, and that's how I really see it. It's like a relationship with source, our guides, any energy that is not necessarily right here on the earthly plane, any energy outside of us but we may be connecting to, we can have those relationships just like it's a relationship here between
Yeah.
people. The more we normalize it and the more that I don't know, I guess that's the best word I can think of for it. It's like the more we normalize it, the more that it just becomes part of your everyday existence, or it just becomes life
Yeah.
versus, like you said, oh, I've got to go off to this place to meditate for 6 hours a day, or I've got to set this special time aside to go, and focus on this. It's like, oh, I'm in the energy of that, the spirit of that all the time.
Yeah.
And you live from that place. And it sounds like you definitely live from that place. What do you do to remind yourself of to be in that place? Because I know that, that's part of the matrix too, is that it can distract us with all sorts of shiny objects to forget and to go back to
Yeah.
sleep from that dual nature of self, that
Yeah.
we are both the soul and the body, and that we're here to have this experience. And we're given a lot of things here to tempt us away from that understanding or that remembrance. So, what are some things that you do to keep that locked in? And
Yeah. Well, I'm a manifesting generator in human design. So one thing I've learned is
me
that
too.
yeah, it's like there's probably nothing I'm going to share that I do every day for the rest of my life. It's very ebb and flow, but there always are tools that I'm using. I just kind of swap them out as intuitively feels good. But I think that is part of just the way that I'm hardwired too, is like, I don't want to do the same thing every day forever. So I have a law of attraction app on my phone. And a lot of times, right when I wake up in the morning, it will be the first thing I think of. And so I open that up, and it's so simple. It asks you like 3 or 4 questions about your day. And Abraham Hicks calls this pre-paving. So it's basically deciding how you want the day to go before it happens, right? And so sometimes I'll do that very first thing in the morning while I'm still in bed. It's like, say the things that I'm going to do today, say how I want them to feel as I do them. What are some of the outcomes that I hope will come from the day? And so that's a really fun and easy way to start from like a in communion with higher self, right? You really have to tap in and be intentional and not just be in this routine that sweeps you away.
Mhm.
Um, I like oracle cards. So sometimes I'll be guided to pull those either for myself or for my clients. And it's like, it's always right on time, whatever the message is. And what else? I cultivating friend group is super important. So, I have friends that are also on their own spiritual paths. And so if you look at our Instagram group chat, it's like we're sending each other very inspiring things and things that remind you. Because it's like you get sucked into the matrix when you forget you're in the matrix. If you have people and things that continue to remind you, that's really helpful. And speaking of that, even if you don't have friends to do it, cultivate your algorithm. If you teach
Right.
Instagram or TikTok or whatever that that's the kind of content you like, then pretty soon you're getting reminders all the time anytime you go on social media. Um, I have things in my house that are kind of like anchor points for me that remind me of certain things. I have like a Sekhmet goddess statue that I got when I was in Egypt. I have a citrine crystal that like every time I look at it makes me think about just manifestation and law of attraction. And so I really believe it's like all these little things sort
Mhm.
of woven together that keep us in remembrance. And I do think it gets easier over time because then that becomes your baseline. And then it's almost like you're just having to remember whatever the frequency or the energy is of the next level, like whatever that is for you. But it's like your baseline gets better and better and better so that even on a bad day, your thoughts are more of a neutral observer versus spiraling into, old patterns and anxiety and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is uh, so true that, and this is going to sound silly to anybody who's ever practiced anything. It's like, of course, as you practice, it becomes easier. That's what practice is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you've ever learned how to play an instrument or play a sport or learn a thing, to study something, that the more you spend with it and involved in it, the more it just becomes ingrained in who
Yeah.
you are. So where you're
Yeah.
not even thinking about it anymore. You're not even,
Right.
you're not you don't need all the little triggers or the things. It's just become part of the fabric of you. And
Yes.
that's, but that on the one hand, that's why the practices are so important. And on the other hand, why they don't mean anything, right? It's
Right.
like it's both.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And, something that I talk to my students and clients about a lot is, if it's new for you to like tap into your intuition or how you feel, or it's new to you to be thinking about manifestation or co creation or asking the divine for support, it's like start small. Start with things that feel inconsequential. Like, what do I feel like having for lunch? Do I want this or this? And like, just stop for a second and tap in and see if your body is guiding you in a certain direction. It's like, there's no huge consequence if you eat the spaghetti instead of the sandwich or vice versa. But it's like, practice on that kind of stuff. Sometimes I see people where it's like the first thing that they want to manifest and the first thing they want their intuition to lead them to is like, whatever, like a $50,000 investment. And it's like, there's a lot going on there. There's a lot of fears being projected on that. We are, because it's related to money, we project a ton onto money anyway, as it is, what it means about us, our worthiness, our belonging. Is it okay? Is it societally acceptable? Can I have it? All this kind of stuff. And so it's like, that's not the best place to start. It's one of the hardest places to start.
Yeah.
Start with what you want to have for lunch, what you want to do that day, which shirt you want to wear, like, and then ask for the divine guidance on things that would just be like a fun bonus, like whatever. I'd love to manifest a red rose today.
Mhm.
Great. Like, I don't have a ton of resistance to that. I don't have a lot of stories around what it means to receive a red rose and if I'm worthy of it and da 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 da. So that's a great place to start. So I just wanted to share that as a little tip for everybody listening, because there's a fun and lightheartedness to it when we pick the stuff that is seemingly inconsequential. And then it feels wonderful when the divine shows up and gives it to us and supports us in it. And then we start to build trust in that relationship.
Yes, it's all about baby steps, starting small. Thank you so much for sharing that advice. I love it. What do you think why is there so much heavy energy around money?
Well, I mean, as you mentioned, ancestral conditioning, familial conditioning, societal conditioning, right? All
Yeah.
of that. And we, if you've ever seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's like this pyramid, and the bottom level is survival needs, like physiological needs, food, shelter, water. And then, one rung up from that is belonging needs. And so until we get those things met, we don't even move up into the levels of thinking about service to our community and self-actualization. And money, well, yes, it's technically just like a piece of paper or whatever, what it symbolizes for most of us is safety and basic needs for survival. And so for a lot of us, the triggers around money and the part of our mind, the unconscious mind that has one mission, which is to keep us alive, gets very activated anytime there's something that it thinks is a perceived threat to our survival. And so, of course, we need money in order to take care of our basic needs. But then we've also often attached money to our belonging in ways that are not necessarily helpful for us, right? So we're afraid of the judgment of others. And if you think about it, when you're a baby, belonging actually is really important for your survival, right? If your parents don't want you as a baby, well, they don't even have to kill you. All they have to do is just, just leave you somewhere. And that lack of belonging equates death. And so many of us are walking around with that same feeling, even though the facts have changed and we're now adults and we're now capable, and a lack of belonging doesn't mean death. Our unconscious mind still processes it in that exact same way. And so what does it do? It starts this whole cascade of physiological responses that are associated with fight, flight, typically those two. So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about this, but you just asked the question, like, why do we project all of this on money? I think there's tons more to it, but at a most basic level, it's because we've equated it with survival, and then one rung up from that, which is belonging, that makes it feel like such a mission critical thing. And therefore, we've added all kinds of extra meanings and conditions and issues on top of it that wouldn't otherwise be there if we were just talking about even oxygen, which oddly is critical to our survival. But,
Yeah.
we just don't feel that way about it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting as you say that, because it's like, I guess there are a subset of people that might have those same similar hangups around food, something that is so
Yeah.
critical for our survival.
Yes.
And maybe something within their life experience created that fractured
Yeah.
or traumatic relationship around something that's so necessary for our life, but
Yes.
yet that relationship is not structured right. It's not strong. It's not like a good attached relationship. It's a really interesting way to look at money, that because it's been tied so much psychologically to our survival, even though we lived at a time. I mean, we humans didn't have money always, right? There wasn't a
Right.
money system for our entire human beingness. So the fact that it's become so tied into survival and belonging and self-worth and things, it's just interesting to think
Yeah.
about that and how influential, I guess, that a system it is, that
Yeah.
it's actually changed us in such deep foundational ways. Whereas
Yeah.
before we may have been cool with just like trading stuff, being like, oh, you did this for
That's
me, I'm
right.
going to do this for you, or here's something,
Yeah.
here's a token of my appreciation, or um, and a gift rather than, oh, it's
Right.
a payment. So it's that to me is fascinating about how in a relatively short time, the money system has really messed up a lot of us.
Yeah. Yeah. But you bring up a good point, because it is not innate to our humanness. And that's a very good thing, because when we look at, any of our beliefs, it's like, was it there the day I was born? And if it wasn't, then it means that it was conditioned. And that means that we can decondition it. It's like, if I ask you to change the color of your skin, or if I ask you to change your eye color, or I ask you to change, something that is more innate to you, you're going to have a lot harder time with that. Like, hey, Carissa, could you just change your height,
Yeah.
please? Right? What? Okay.
Yeah.
But our beliefs, our thoughts, our feelings, those have been conditioned, and they can be deconditioned, and they're not absolute truth. And we can change them, and we can have a completely different relationship with money, where it feels neutral, or it feels positive, where it feels good to spend, it feels good to save, it feels good to receive. That's very, very possible.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point about life in general, that most of it is conditioned, isn't it?
Yeah.
Most of what we feel and think and how we operate in the world, it has been programmed into us. And that to me is such a empowering realization,
Right.
because of exactly what you said. Oh, that means I
Yeah.
can deprogram and
Yeah.
decondition from this, that it actually doesn't have to be this way. I have so loved
Yes.
our conversation. What are the ways that those who want to deprogram, decondition themselves from these money wounds, what are some of the things that they can do with you to get that process started?
Yeah, so I have a free quiz if you go to moneywoundsquiz.com, and that allows you to on the spot diagnose your top money wounds, and it leads you into some free healing resources. So that's a great place to start. We mentioned the book, which is available on Amazon as an ebook, paperback, or an audiobook. So you just search wounds to wealth and you'll get that. I do have a program called Money Wound Medicine where I've guided hundreds of students through this process of diagnosing and healing their money wounds and then alchemizing them into new channels of wealth. So, you can reach out to me or go to emilywilcox.com to find info about that. So those are some great ways to get started. And then I do one-off intensives as well. So, I use a method called RRT, which is really
Mm.
effective at removing that old programming, the way that unconscious was processing information and causing it to process in a new way that's more in alignment with how you want to feel and how you want things to be for you. So that's a fun way to interact and work together as well.
Beautiful. And tune into your podcast.
Yes, the
Yeah.
joyous path to millions.
Yay. I'm going to put all the links to all of that stuff in the show notes so people can connect to you. And I love talking to, and I just want to remind people, I mean, you probably heard it through this whole conversation that, you know, I talk to people who are walking the talk. Emily's gone through this herself. It's not, oh, I've got this wisdom that I took a course on and now I'm going to pass that on to you. She's actually lived this and is living this path. And to me, that's the most valuable to others wanting to learn is work with people who are living that path, that are actually in it rather than just talking about it.
Mm,
And Emily is one of those people. So if you're interested in not just, to me, what it sounds like, not just tapping into the your own wounds to achieve more wealth, but to simply do that for the purpose of understanding who you are more, to getting to that
yes.
place of living a more fulfilling and dream life, whatever that looks like, and ultimately to live that life in connection to the divine and to source. So if those are goals of yours, things that you want to do, Emily sounds like such a beautiful guide and mentor in all of that. So connect with her. Thank you so much, Emily, for connecting with us. I'm so excited to stay in touch with you and talk to you again. Thank
Yeah,
you.
likewise. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.